Hey fam, welcome to another episode of Good, Bad, and Ugly about real estate. I got a great guest for you, a new friend of mine, Chris Logan.
Hey, what's going on? Great to be on the show, Jose. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I try to bring everybody on that can bring value to the people that are watching this, and hopefully bring value to yourself as well. Chris and I just met recently, and I think he's a great person to share with you guys. Wholesaling is usually the intro to most people into real estate, and he's going to share his story and his knowledge with you. So on that, Chris, go ahead and share who you are, how you got to where you are today.
Awesome. Well, again, Jose, thanks for the amazing intro there. Yeah, guys, my name is Chris Logan, and I have been wholesaling houses for the last 12 years with my wife. When I first got started in this, it was like most people get started, right? Like you have this desire to make money in real estate. Maybe you saw a family member make money in real estate. Maybe like you saw a late night infomercial, right? And you just had this desire to be successful in it because you saw that it was possible, right? You just didn't know where to start. So that was me. And I remember after church one week, I went up to a friend of mine who I knew he was really successful, but I didn't know if he was in real estate at all. And I told him how I was looking to get into real estate. And he was like, man, you got to read the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And so I said, done, And so I read the book in one night and stayed up till 3 a.m. and finished it. And it totally like blew my mind because it really just kind of exposed the quote unquote American dream where you work at a job till you're 65 years old, you retire, you have the house, the white picket fence, and hopefully you have enough of your health left over to where you can enjoy life and retire at that point, right? But that life just never fit my idea of desirable, right? It's not something I ever really wanted. And so I just felt like there was a lot more, right? I wanted to be able to have the financial freedom, the location freedom, the time freedom to do what I want, when I wanted, with who I wanted, whenever I wanted, right? And so what I did is after reading that book, I was checking my email one day at my girlfriend's house, who's now my wife, and I saw a banner ad that Robert Kiyosaki was coming to Tampa Bay, right? And I was like, shoot, man, I'm going to go meet this guy. I'm going to shake his hand, tell him how much he's changed my life. Of course, I get there and he's not there, right? His team was there, right? But I learned a lot at that event, and that event really gave me the foundation in real estate. And I remember very clearly the moment that everything shifted for me. Where I went from confusion of not knowing where to start to clarity. So I was sitting in this ballroom and there was probably, I don't know, maybe 300 people there, 500 people in this ballroom. And there was the speaker who's at the front of the room, and they had this whiteboard, right? And or I think it was like a projector back then. And so anyway, so they were writing all the different ways you could make money in real estate on the projector, right? They were showing like real estate development. They were talking about being a landlord. They were talking about creative finance. They were talking about flipping houses, investing in commercial properties, multifamily, all these types of things, right? But there was one strategy that really just hit home for me. And I was like, man, this makes sense. And that was wholesaling. When they started talking about how you could take a piece of paper and you could flip that piece of paper for tens of thousands of dollars, right? You didn't need bank loans. That's good because I probably couldn't qualify for them at the time. You didn't need, any of your own personal money to be able to invest in these deals, which is good because I didn't have a lot at the time, right? But I had a desire to be successful. And again, I looked at my wife and I was like, this just makes sense. So we went back to the room and we signed up for a wholesaling boot camp for 3 days in Miami. We learned all the ins and outs. And I would love to say that we immediately just started crushing it and deals started falling from the sky and everything was perfect. But that's not the case. What actually ended up happening is it took us roughly about 6 months to do our first deal after I had made every single mistake you could possibly think of in this business on the path to getting my first deal done. But that first deal, it was for $4,000. And at the time, that $4,000 meant everything to me because it showed me that this business was possible. And I immediately thought to myself, you know what? If I can make 4,000, I can make 40,000. If I can make 40,000, I can make 400,000 and so on. Right.
Sure.
So fast forward about 2 years before COVID, we made the decision to go virtual. right? Because we had started talking to sellers on the phone. It was going crazy. Like we were going on 15 appointments a week and just being so exhausted by the end of the week that, sitting in traffic and all that stuff, it just seemed so like pointless to us, right? We're like, we got to be able to do this business a different way.
Right.
And so we started closing some deals over the phone, and we're like, you know what, this works for a handful of these deals. Let's try and do it with all of them, right? So what that basically means is that we were no longer driving back and forth to properties. We were no longer overseeing showings with buyers. We were literally talking to a seller over the phone, having them agree to a purchase price, sending them an agreement through DocuSign, getting the deal under contract, and then sending that out to our list for people to, for our investor buyers to want to buy that property, right? Yeah. So we did that, and then COVID hit, right? And the whole world was in a panic. Everything was at a standstill, except the fact that we had already gone virtual 2 years before COVID. And so when that time hit, while a lot of people got caught with their pants down, thankfully, we were blessed to thrive that year and actually have one of our best years ever. So fast forward from there, we've done over 600 deals. We've scaled our business to over 7 figures. And now we're like really passionate about showing other newbies like how to avoid a lot of the mistakes that we made in the very beginning and get their first deal, even if they have a full-time job.
Awesome. So I want to take it back a little bit because, people's like, oh, I don't know nothing about real estate. What did you do prior to, like, what was your background before going to that boot camp?
Yeah, sure. Great question. So I've always been in sales, right? My first job was a telemarketing job. I was in a call center calling angry people in New York for phone surveys on the Teamsters and toilet paper around 7 o'clock at night. And I'm telling you, you want to get thick skin, call New Yorkers in the Bronx at 7 o'clock at night when it's time for dinner and ask them what they think about politics or toilet paper. I mean, it's bananas. So that really gave me some thick skin. And then I went on to selling phones inside a booth in the mall. I was that guy from T-Mobile, like calling people over to get them to want to switch service and everything. Highly obnoxious, right? But that built a lot of thick skin. And then from there, at the time I got into real estate, I was working for a marketing agency where I would meet with small to medium-sized businesses doing door knocking, cold calls, to help them out with like marketing plans for their business, like SEO, pay-per-click, all that stuff.
Gotcha. So you said you attended a 3-day boot camp and it wasn't as successful as you expected it to be after attending it. Yeah. What was it? Was it something inside yourself, or was it the people around you that took that, I don't want to say negative, but that not success that you were looking for to keep pushing through?
Yeah. So I think, for me, I was getting in my own way a lot. Just like I feel like this is the number one thing that people go through when they first get started in real estate, because people are used to that W-2 mentality where they're working for a company. And if they put in X number of hours, they should get paid X number of dollars, right? When you got your own business, that ain't how it works, right? A lot of times you're overworked and underpaid in the beginning, but eventually you're overpaid and underworked, right? That's what everyone wants to get to. Exactly. So for me, I was just overthinking everything, analysis paralysis, like getting inside my own head, lost in the sauce. And while the coaching that I took was a great coaching program in the sense that it gave me the foundation, the basics, it really didn't give me a clear plan as far as like what to do next.
Sure.
So it just said, here's a bunch of different things you can do. Go ahead and do them, and then let us know how you do them. Right. But there was no real coaching after that. So that's when I was like, you know what? In order for me to take this seriously, like to get results, like I need to take this seriously above and beyond the course or the 3-day boot camp we got. And we need a mentor, right? So we called the same company, and I was on the phone with one of their people. And it was just a crazy pivotal time because I'd never invested any type of money like that before. And it was just so crazy. And then he says it's going to be $10,000. And I was like, holy, right? And I was like, I don't have 10,000, right? But one of the shifts that I think that I had the blessing of having in the very beginning is that I firmly believe, man, that you don't say to yourself, like, you don't have something. You ask yourself, how can I come up with something? Right. And that's a big shift. A lot of people get into this business and they're like, oh, I can't do this because I can't do that. I can't do this because I don't have that. I can't get started. But they don't even ask if there's another option or another solution that's available. So thankfully, this guy was willing to work with me, and we were able to get on board mentoring. And that's when things really took off. I got a clear plan. I knew exactly what I needed to do every single day. And we got our first deal. And from there, what I typically find is after you get your first deal, the second one comes immediately behind it. And then we started just focusing on being more consistent in our activity, tracking our activity. And then we turned it into a consistent machine where we can do deals every month. Went from 1 deal a month to 2 deals a month, 3, 4, 5. Our top month, we had 22 deals under contract. So
that's good.
Yeah, thank you. So that's really what it comes down to. Is it comes down to having clear direction and a plan, and then being consistent and focused every single day.
So you mentioned that you guys were driving to initially and then decided to go virtually. So when you went virtually, did you still stay in your local market, or did you go nationwide? And then if you did go nationwide, how did you identify the markets that you wanted to do virtually or remotely, as they would most commonly called?
Sure. So I'm gonna answer both of those questions that you have. So the first off, when we went virtual, we were blessed to be already located in a great market, right? So Tampa Bay, Florida was on fire when we first got into it, right? And that was already a fantastic market. So there's no need to look elsewhere because we were doing a lot of deals there, right?
Sure.
So we said, we're going to test virtual here. Now, going virtual in your own market is harder than going virtual in a market that you can't drive to. The reason being is you're tempted to always be like, okay, I can just drive to this property really quick and take pictures. I don't have to wait for someone to do it for me. I'm just going to go do it. Right. So that's where it gets a bit hard. But then my wife and I were talking, and she's like, Chris, we got to treat our home market like it's 2 states away from us, where it's impossible for us to drive there. And if we're really going to own this virtual thing. Right. And so that's what we did. We started treating it like it was 2 states away, too far to drive. And we really committed to going all into the virtual side. Now, how we identified Tampa Bay was a good market. Number one, we just happened to be doing deals there. But we noticed a pattern between Tampa Bay and then the next virtual market we went into, which was 2 hours away from Tampa Bay, right? And then we were successful there. And then we went on to the next virtual market, which was 9 hours away, right? And so we're like, okay, this model is successful. So we figured out like a copy and paste system, a 2-step system to be able to identify the hottest markets across the country. We've tested this in multiple states. It works. And it's a way that anybody anywhere can identify the hottest areas with the most cash buyers anywhere across the country in like 10 minutes. Cool if I share?
Please. We'd love to.
Awesome. So the 2-step system we have works like this. First thing you want to do is you want to do a quick Google search. And you want to type in the county in the state that you're looking to do deals, right? I find that most people have a starting point. Some people are like, I'm thinking about doing deals here because I heard that market's good, or I have a family member that lives there. I have a friend that lives there. I like, I've always wanted to own property here. I want to move there someday. So people have this idea typically in their mind of a starting point, and that's all they need, right? Sure. So they take that starting point, and we always search by the county first, okay? So we type in the county, the state, and then we type in population size into Google, right? And then what we're looking for is we're looking for a population size minimum of 250,000 people. Okay. What we typically find, and Google will tell you that right on the screen, what we typically find is if you're in an area less than 250,000 people, it's more of like a rural type area where you're not going to have a problem getting deals under contract. It's actually going to be fairly easy to get deals under contract, but you're going to have a really tough time selling those deals, right? And so, so that being the case, that presents a problem because in wholesaling, like it all starts with the buyer, right? You find your buyer and you find out what they want. You do marketing for what they want and bring it to them. And when you do that, it becomes so much easier, where a lot of people start with the deal first and they just pray it sells, right? So if you don't have buyers, like you don't have a business in wholesaling. So the second step, once we've identified the population size of the territory, the second step is to go to Google again and type in the county, state, and then median home price, MEDIAN, right? For those who are listening that don't know what the median home price is, if you imagine a timeline of house prices, on the far left, you have the $50,000 and less houses on the far left, and you have the multi-million-dollar house on the far right. The one in the middle is the median home price, right? That's the price. That's the most common type of house being bought and sold, the one that everybody wants, and the ones that most people can afford, right? And so when you do that search in Google, you're going to see a Zillow link. Click the Zillow link, and it's going to say the median home price. You want that to be a minimum of $200,000, right? The reason for that is anything less than $200,000, again, you start going into that rural territory. But anything greater than $200,000, you're good. And we typically cap it around $450,000, right? Because that's really the sweet spot where investors like to buy. The closer you are to 200,000, the better of a market's going to be, the easier it's going to be to get do deals. But the closer you get to that 450,000 is really where things start to heat up. It starts getting a little tough to get deals. And, you know, you're going to have a lot of sellers that feel like they have options.
Awesome. So, you know, being an investor myself, when I first started, the hardest part was convincing the seller to allow me to assign or to take what I'm buying it for and then make money myself. How would you advise new investors that are trying to do wholesaling to be ethical as far as presenting what their intent is, while still being able to make a business of this? Because, you know, right now, a lot of the states are coming up with regulation. They make it harder to wholesale. So how would you advise new investors who are looking at you and saying, you know what, I like Chris, I want to use his system? How would you advise them to take the next step?
Sure. Like when talking with sellers?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. So this is a great question because a lot of wholesalers, when they first get started, they feel like they need to say, hey, I'm a wholesaler. I'm wholesaling your property, blah, 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 right? And the issue with that, and everybody has their own preference, right? But the issue with that, sellers don't know what a wholesaler is. Okay. Sellers have no idea what a wholesaler is unless they've had a bad experience before or even a good experience, right? And so when you're talking about this to a seller, they're looking at you like you have three heads. They're like, wait, so you're going to sell this like a realtor? Is that what you're doing? And you don't want to get into that type of conversation, right? So the best thing to do is to go by the title that's on the agreement, right? The title on the agreement is you're the buyer, right? So you're a buyer and you're making them a cash offer. They don't care if it's your money or your buyer's money that's closing on the deal. All they care is that you fulfill on the obligation that you agreed to, which was getting them cash for their property and abiding by the terms of the agreement. That's it, right? And so when you lead with wholesaling like that, it becomes a lot easier because you're almost like manufacturing objections when you go deep into the conversation with the seller saying what your intent to reassign the property. Because here's the thing, like these sellers are all in financial distress, right? They don't want to know that you're making money on their property. That's the last thing they want, actually, right? And so so assignments were created legally for a reason, to be able to switch entities at the time of closing, right? And wholesaling's been going on for decades. And so the best thing you can do is keep it simple. You're a buyer, they're a seller, that's it. And that's how you move forward. Now, there are certain states that you do have to disclose that you're when you assign the property to a buyer, right? And there's certain states that you have to let the seller know that you plan to wholesale their property, right? But there's a way to explain everything that alleviates concerns and makes people happy to move forward. Our positioning has always been, we're going to wholesale it because who knows, we may buy it, we may double close on it, we may, assign it. We're really not sure. And so at the end of the day, we make an offer. And as long as we stick to the terms of the agreement, we get the seller what they want. That's all that really matters. And lastly on this is like, we're not in the business of convincing sellers. The deal that you get by convincing sellers is the deal that you don't want. Okay. Because that's the seller who really doesn't need what you have to offer, doesn't want what you have to offer. And then they have buyer's remorse and then they don't want to move forward. So I'm a very firm believer to never convince anything, have the sellers chase you, have the seller tell you how much they want for the property, right? Don't make offers, have the sellers tell you how much they want. And if they won't tell you how much they want, are they even really serious about selling it, right? So just being able to have that conversation with them and just understanding what to say and what not to say, like gives you a lot of peace in that transaction because you can be confident that everything's going to go the right way for the most part.
Awesome. So in your when you're teaching your students, do you teach them strictly offering a cash offer, or do you teach them to do creative offers as well?
Yeah. So I'm a firm believer that when people are first starting out, that they focus on one strategy. The part of the reason why I took 6 months to do my first deal, I was focusing on lease options, creative finance, wholesaling, double closing, like all these fix and flipping, all these different strategies, right? And we've been sold this belief that in order to get deals done, you got to be a transactional engineer, know 50 ways to do a deal. The problem is when you're first getting started and you're working on your first deal, knowing 50 ways to do a deal actually hurts you more than it helps, because you'll spend 2 hours analyzing a deal to try to even figure out if it's a deal. You step away, you're so confused by the end. And then while you're in that meantime trying to figure it out, I'm talking with the seller, my team's talking with the seller, getting that deal under contract, right? So I firmly believe simple is better. There's a time and a place for creative finance. There's a time for fix and flipping. There's a time for like lease options and all that other stuff. But in your first 12 to 18 months, when you're first getting started in wholesaling, that's your time to just focus on one strategy. Because if you can do that, you can understand what buyers want. You can understand like what a good deal is, what's not a good deal. At the end of 12 to 18 months, when you do want to start owning some of those properties, you can make more confident buying decisions. A lot of things can go wrong on the creative finance side if you don't know what you're doing, because you're physically owning that property, right? You have legal responsibility to that property. Or if you try to start out by fixing and flipping, you could lose a lot of money because you overestimate the repairs, underestimate the repairs, overestimate the value, underestimate it, how long it takes to sell, the holding costs, all that stuff. And it's dangerous. So wholesaling, there's no funds out of your pocket needed to be able to do a deal. Mm-hmm. And that's how it should be while you're learning in the beginning.
Awesome. So I want to take a step back. One of the misnomers of wholesaling is, or even real estate in whole, is that you have to have a license to to be a real estate investor. What would you say to somebody that came up to you and said, do you have a license to do real estate?
So I would tell them I do, because I do. but if I didn't know, here's what I would tell them, right? The thing is that, wholesaling for the longest time was fairly unregulated, right? There was no license requirement. There was no disclosure requirements, no marketing requirements. It was the wild, wild west for so long, right? And then a lot of people started coming into the business and giving the business a bad name because they have poor business ethics, right? They don't care about the sellers. They just care about making that money, right? And they don't know what they're doing. They don't have proper guidance. They didn't have a coach. And so they're flat out lying, whether consciously or unconsciously, to these sellers. And that's where the need for regulation came into play, right? And so when it comes to having a license, it really depends on which state you're in. There's certain states that say, yes, you need to have a license, right? And there's certain states that do not require you to have a license. Now, there's also certain states that may not require you to have a license, but they have disclosure requirements. So this is why more than ever now, it's so critical to have the right guidance in wholesaling, whether that's from a mentor, whether that's from a friend who's doing it that's successful, whether it's from a real estate attorney. But you always want to make sure and review your legal options before you get started, like anything, and do your own due diligence to make sure you stay out of hot water. And that's really what I recommend for people. If they're wondering if their state requires a license, hire a mentor, talk to a real estate attorney, find out. That way you can have the peace of mind that you can start with confidence.
Perfect. So, when I was wholesaling, one of the things that my buyers would always appreciate about me is comping the property, giving them good information, right? Mm-hmm. Buying at a great price, showing them that here are 2 or 3 properties that if you fix this thing up, this is what it would be like. What value would you give it to a wholesaler who knows how to comp a property?
So comping is one of the most valuable skills that you can have as a wholesaler, because that lays the foundation for everything else. There's 2 areas where people mess up the most in wholesaling and where they get their numbers wrong. It's either valuing the house, so comping, and then repairs, right? Those are 2 areas I find that wholesalers mess up the most. But it's so critical to make sure that your numbers are right and you're comping correctly, because if you can estimate the after repaired value of a house like fairly accurately, that means the offer that you're going to be making off of that number is going to be accurate and in line with what expectations are in that area, right? And you have the best chance of getting your offers accepted. A lot of people, they have their offers turned down from sellers because they're simply making offers that are too low, right? That's just not realistic for the area. I'm all fan of making lower offers, but you also got to be realistic for what's acceptable in that area. And the best way to do that, again, is like you said, to get better at comps. Just practice every single day. The more you practice, the better you get. And then from there, just get an understanding of your area. Do a lot of research on your area. Get familiar with the virtual territory that you're in, right? What are the hot spots? Where are investors buying? Where are they not buying, right? And understand the market. And then that point, you're set up to really thrive.
Another thing that I did when I was wholesaling, we had the napkin type of calculating repairs, right? $15 a square foot, $25 a square foot, 15 or little light, moderate, and heavy, right? 35.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So with COVID, a lot of things got expensive. These things today, with inflation, things are expensive. What is a general rule in today's market that you would suggest people to do what we call the napkin rehab budget for a wholesaling if they're trying to generate their numbers so they know what to offer?
Yeah. Great question, man. And this is probably one of the biggest questions I get. So I love this question. So here's the thing. We used to do that as well, like the dollar price per square foot method. The issue is, like you said, after COVID, things just really shot up, and things are changing so much these days that you have to update that formula like every single month, right? So it's just not something that works in today's environment. Some other people will try the 75% of ARV minus repair method, and then they're going on sites like HomeWise or talking with contractors, how much repairs are. The problem with that is everybody's numbers are different. Does someone have a general contractor that's doing the project, right? Do they sub things out, or do they have an in-house team? Do they get discounts on materials? Is the buyer doing the work himself, in which he saves on all that money, right? So there's too many variables there. So we actually came up with something called our easy offer method that makes this so much easier, right? And what we do instead is we basically make an offer to a seller off of a flat percentage, right? So for example, once we've come up with the value of the house, the after repaired value, by looking at 3 similar sales of like our property in the area, right, that are fully remodeled, so we can get the value of our property after it's been fully remodeled, right? Once we have that number, our next step is to look at what the percentage is in that area to be able to, that's acceptable and realistic to get the deal under contract, right? So our flat percentage takes into account repairs already. So you're not sitting there trying to figure out the cost of, cabinet knobs or kitchen cabinets and bathrooms and all that stuff. And the way that we do it is, for example, there's certain markets where you can make an offer 50 to 55% of the after repaired value, and that's very acceptable for a standard renovation, right? And there's certain areas where you make an offer anywhere from 60 to 65% of that number. So it really just depends on the state. I have this all broken down for my coaching clients, and they have all the flat percentages across the entire country. But as a general rule of thumb, if you don't have coaching and you're in a situation where you just want to make offers and get some things done, take massive imperfect action, generally speaking, if you make an offer of 50 to 55% of the after repaired value and you sell that property for 60 to 65%, then typically that's going to be a deal anywhere you look across the country.
That was great advice. Trying to think of some other wholesaling things. Oh, so we've been talking to sellers when we present these offers. Yep. Is there any adjustment if you're going through an agent on making these offers?
So one of the things that we like to do is make offers direct to seller. Anytime you add a third party in there, things get a little complicated, especially if they're versed in real estate and they have real estate experience, because then they're tearing apart your contract. They're telling you how much you got to put down for a deposit, and it gets a little messy, right? So there can be great deals coming from agents, but in the very beginning, when you're just starting this journey, I always recommend going direct to seller. If an agent is involved in the transaction, you want to make sure that agent actually has an active listing agreement with that seller. Okay. If the agent says no, then you're dealing with the seller, right? But if the agent says yes, then you can't go around the seller to that, you can't go around the agent to that seller unless their type of listing agreement allows for it. And there are certain types of listing agreements that allow you to deal directly with the seller, even though there's an agent involved and they're going to get their commission either way. So it's best to talk with the seller and then find out what's the best way to move forward if you find out there is an agent involved.
Awesome. MLS is, or, realtor.com is a quick way of identifying properties that are for sale. So without giving away too much of your secrets, how would you advise somebody who's new to identify a seller that is listing their property or is interested in buying or selling, excuse me?
Yeah. So when it comes to sellers, right, we have to think about motivation. Like, what are some things that cause people to want to sell their property, right? An easy one, just kind of referencing a free site like you're talking about realtor.com, pre-foreclosures. You can easily find these for free on Zillow. These are homeowners who are facing foreclosure. They're listed publicly in most states. And you just simply call these people and find out if they're open to a cash offer for their property, right? Don't reference the foreclosure. That's the worst thing you can do. A lot of people have different cycles of thought on this. They say you should reference the foreclosure. Look, these people are feeling like they're getting kicked while they're down, like all over the place. They're getting thousands of calls a week, right? The last thing you want to do is be another person and just kind of lumped into that group. So you want to give them a call as a local, just like a local home buyer in the area that came across their property on Zillow and wanted to see if they'd be open to a cash offer, right? But that's really what I recommend there. And it's anytime there's someone that has a distressed property. So a lot of times you can tell if a seller's motivated just by looking at the outside of the property. So if you go on Zillow and you look at for sale by owner properties and you see properties that have like dingy looking photos, not professionally taken, the grass is kind of like grown over, bushes all over the place, the property is just not very well taken care of. That could be a motivated homeowner that you should have a conversation with, because obviously there's some type of motivation going on there. You just have to find out what it is.
Awesome. You've been doing this for a long time. You said 12 years. And over that time, you've had some success stories and some, oh my gosh, I wish I would have known this before that happened, right? Can you share with us a good story that you've had in your journey, and then maybe one that what I call a very, I call them expensive webinars because I usually lose money in them, but a story that, you wish you had known something before it happened, or lesson learned type of thing.
Yeah. So I'll share my one of my wins, something I'm really proud about. The moment in this business that I feel like I had this epiphany where this business can be truly amazing was when we had hired our team. When we first hired a team and we started to hand off some things in the business. And I remember being at my brother-in-law's wedding. We were sitting at the beach after the wedding had ended. And I got a notification on my phone that I just had a wire transfer for like $25,000, right? I didn't talk to a seller. I didn't put a deal under contract. I didn't sell it to a buyer. Our team did that while we were gone. And I think that was the biggest epiphany moment for me, because I was like, man, this is amazing. I could get used to this. I'm getting paid to be on vacation, right? Yeah. And so that was my win. That was something I was very proud about. And that's where all the hard work ends up paying off. Some people in wholesaling, they don't want to take it that far. Some people just want to stack some cash and maybe use that to invest in properties. We wanted to make it to where we had a team doing deals on our behalf, and that we could help create winners and create a path for their success and just impact other people. And that's the direction we ended up taking from it. So that was our win. And as far as a big mistake, so like a lot of people, when you first start to have success in something, you think you can be successful in other areas too. right? You start getting this ego where you're like, oh, we've been so successful with this. I can easily be successful with this, right? So we started renovating properties. And our first one, we knocked it out of the park. We made like 75 grand on it. It was an amazing deal we bought from a wholesaler. And then we did a handful of those and finally reached one specific project where we knew it was out of our, we had all that time we had stuck with cookie cutter homes, right? Block houses, very simple, moderate level renovations, nothing crazy, right? No foundational issues, nothing like that. Stuck to the easy properties. We decided we came across this one wholesale deal and we're like, we could wholesale this and make like 15 grand on it, or we could take it down ourselves and renovate it because it didn't look like it needed that much work and it was in a great part of town. But it was a wood frame property, like almost like a historic property. And we had no business doing anything with that property, no experience with those types of properties. But we took it on because we felt we could probably make another 50 or 60 grand or more once we sold it, right?
Sure.
The property ended up being the biggest nightmare of our life, right? We are lucky we got out of it alive, right? Everything that could come up on the property came up. We had to redo the foundation of the property, right? All the joists underneath the hardwood floors, all those were going bad. We had to redo that. Really bad termite damage when we started opening up walls that we couldn't see because the property looked like it was in pretty good shape.
Sure.
Outside of that, we had to move the kitchen from the center of the house to a corner in the house. And that was just a massively unplanned expense.
Sure.
And just thing after thing after thing started coming up. We didn't realize that in that neighborhood that 2-bedroom houses were not popular. All the other houses on the street were 3 and 4 bedrooms. So we tried adding a bedroom ourselves and that didn't work. And long story short, we ended up partnering with this experienced rehabber who we thought had experience in renovating these types of properties because we reached the end of our expertise and we're like, we need help, right? So we partnered up with them. And long story short, we ended up losing like 6 figures on that deal.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a heavy hit, a really, really heavy hit. But, the biggest thing we learned from that was a lesson. And that lesson was stay in your lane. Stay what you're good at, right? Have a buy box and then don't go outside of that buy box, right? Because like I said, everything that could possibly come up came up on that property. And we were just wondering when it was going to end, if we were going to get out of it alive. But thankfully, by the grace of God, we did. And and since then, we've never renovated that type of property like ever again.
Fair. Thanks for sharing. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
During this time, you've shared so much knowledge with the people that are watching. If somebody wanted to follow you to see, how your journey's progressing, or if they wanted to take advantage, because the one thing we haven't shared is you do offer mentorship. You have a program. Mm-hmm. If you want to talk about that, I'll give you some time to do that right now.
Sure. Yeah. So if there's anybody that's listening on this and maybe you've really kind of resonated with some of the things I'm talking about here, and you just feel like you're spinning your wheels, not doing deals, maybe you've bought other courses, invested in their coaches, and you just can't figure out what's broken, and you have a desire to not only get to that first deal, but create a consistent and sustainable business that can either supplement your job or it can eventually help you out of that job, right? Like Jose and myself. So if that's what you're looking for and you're looking to take this business seriously, then what I'd recommend you to do is go to virtualwholesalingmadesimple.com. And I'm sure Jose will put it in the show notes here and apply, click the button to apply to work with me, right? From there, I'll ask you, there's just a handful of questions on there. It's just a quick pre-call application to see if we're aligned and if we're a good fit to work together. And then from then, if I like what you have to say, then I'll consider inviting you into the program if we're a good fit. But that's the best way to get in touch with me. And I look forward to connecting with anybody. And then outside of that, the best place people to connect with me on social media, I have the same handle across all platforms, and that's Chris Logan, REI. And I have a free Facebook group that you can join for virtual wholesaling as well. If you'd like to learn more about that, then you can also go to that group. But if you're looking for someone to help you go from zero to your first deal and do deals consistently, again, you can go to virtualwholesalingmadesimple.com, and I'd love to have a conversation, see if we're a fit.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. And he just gave you even some more value, audience. He just gave you a free Facebook group that now you can interact with people that are either being coached by him or want to be coached by him, and you can utilize those people and network. That's one of the biggest things that I would give to you guys is network in this industry, because you never know what the other person has that you may need, and vice versa. So on that note, Chris, thank you so much for coming out, spending some time with us, dropping all these golden nuggets for people to take and hopefully run with. I hope they take you up on your offer as far as your mentorship and start making the money that you're making. To the audience, thank you so much for spending time with us today, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, Jose.